Yeah, I have to do something, don't I? We'll try this. Oh, we're already messed up. Just a minute. All right, there we go, see. 80 years in the most wonderful profession you could imagine. If you had to design a profession, design a, what do they call it? You have to do this in the government. That you have to design a. It's what your job description is, you know. Landscape architecture would be the one to do. And at 4.5, I was into plants, and of course I thought plants was landscape architecture. I didn't realize you had to have a client and a site, and the client had to have certain resources and so on and so on. But I found that out much, much later. But by that time, I was already hooked. And by the time I was in college, I was addicted. I mean, it is a wonderful addiction to have. And don't let anybody try to give you a 12-step program or anything to break it. So what happened in these 80 years, that's what we're going to do. We're going to run through that fairly rapidly and look at a few highlights and so on. I had all the breaks in the world. My parents, they were so different. It was a wonder that they stayed together and had children and everything, you know. The one was very religious and one was an atheist, and that's the table I grew up at. My mother owned me on Sunday, and my father owned me the rest of the week. So that was the situation. And then at about 8 years old, landscape architects used to come to our farm, our nursery. My father was a nurseryman. And that, let's see, I must have hit the reverse. Well, it's over, folks. It's over. Okay, so this is the farm I grew up on. This is the barn, and that's the walnut tree. That walnut tree probably saved my life. And when you're in the sub-teens probably, and the minister's following you up and down the rows of corn, trying to get you to kneel out there, and you're wondering what it's all about, you're asking all the God questions, and you go through these periods of depression and so on, and when I'd hit that, I'd climb up in that tree. I grew up with that tree. That tree was a sapling when I was a sprout, and then I would climb up there in the uppermost branches and just sway, and the light would go down and the lights would come up across the river. This was in Kentucky. And I'd climb down, go up to the house, and maybe my mother left a plate set or something, go to bed. Anyhow, that tree, very important to me, to my life. The greenhouses, those were my early cathedral. We lived in a shack mainly, really, but the greenhouse was like a crystal cathedral that I'd go to, and I still have dreams that I'm coming back from the war, and my plants, I want to see how they're doing, faring. My father used to let me grow plants under the benches in the greenhouse, so I still have that as a recurrent dream. Well, this place is all totally wiped out now. It's like Levittown, Louisville or something. No. It's very precise. So, in the Great Depression, there was no one to buy trees, had money or plants or landscapes, so we went into a self-sustaining farm role, you might say, and we grew all our own crops. And we hired all my mother's relatives who lived up in Detroit and weren't building automobiles anymore, so they came down and we built shacks for them, and they worked in the nursery and worked it with the animals. And so the animals got us through the Depression, and the fact that and the deep freeze was invented, and we had a smokehouse. We did all our own killing and butchering and everything. And I think it's really a wonderful way to grow up. And the woods were all around us, and we had camps out in the woods, and we'd spend overnights out there. This is a pond that my father and I, and we dug this pond with two mules and a slip scraper. And that pond was important during the Depression because we had fish whenever we wanted them. My mother learned to fish, which is really something. Okay, the high school, I wasn't doing too well, and I decided to join the Army right after Pearl Harbor. So it took a few months to convince anybody to take me, but finally the Army relented, and so I went in May. And so I was 4 years in the military, served in India, and occasionally flew over the hump into China. Anyhow, that was a very painful but necessary part of adolescence, of post-adolescence, growing up and being under a disciplinary system. And first thing they do in your first meal, they give you free cigarettes, So 1942, I'm hooked. For 40 years, I'm hooked. Can you believe that? Criminal. Then the GI Bill of Rights came. I got a medical discharge in 45 and went to University of Illinois. And there I met Stanley White, the teacher on your right, one of the all-time great teachers of landscape architecture in all time, of all time. And at the same time, there was Hideo Sasaki here on your left. And that's the military Jeep. That was another thing I got out of my service, was a military Jeep, which we drove around New England with White and through the west to Berkeley with Hideo Sasaki. So these two great teachers, they're sort of like my mother and father. They were extreme opposites. One was very romantic and highly artistic, emotional, and just believed in filling your mind with good things, good thoughts, and good books, and that design was almost like an act of God. And the other teacher, Hideo Sasaki, was very scientific and very rational and organized and orthogonal, you could say, And so being there with those two teachers at the same time was often excruciating but still exhilarating a situation. You only needed 2 or 3 good teachers if you get them at the right time. There's Sasaki lighting up. We all smoke. We used to take smoke breaks in the class, Oops. Do it, baby. So I had 3.5 years at Illinois. I thought I'd had the best of the faculty there, and so I talked to Sasaki, then it's getting boring here and not challenging, and so he said, go to Berkeley. That's where Ekbo and Church and Royston and Halpern and these people were starting to do the new wave of landscape architecture. The real break, the break that Ekbo, Kiley, and Rose in 1940, I think they got expelled from Harvard because they rebelled. They thought there was a conspiracy to prolong the Italianate bilateral symmetry approach to landscape architecture, which is, I use it I still use it. Kylie used it. Nothing wrong with symmetry. In fact, it's a good thing because you just have to design half the design and you get the full fee. I mean, think about it. But I didn't feel, I wasn't ready, you know. I was incompetent, incapable. And so I transferred to Berkeley, and I went there a year. And I still felt unfulfilled, unfinished. So I had a job offered me, and well, go there. Anyhow, I ended up going to Harvard. Hideo snuck me into Harvard a couple of months after the program started, and that must have been the fall of 1950. So I went there. I should have finished in a year, but a year and a half. I had a problem with one wonderful, tough, mean, nasty professor. And I showed him. I did all the engineering. Hey, we could do. This is where landscape lost out, you know, is that we did not do sewer systems and water distribution systems and electrical and all that. We gave that all to the engineers in the 20s and 30s. And this professor, you had to do. I did a new town, a green belt town, and I did all the engineering for it, the water and sewer and all the infrastructure, you know. And Cloverleaf highways, Cloverleaf, we used to have to design one of those. Not that I would ever want to do that, but at least you are able to talk to engineers like you're not somebody that just plants bushes, you know. Anyhow, to get back to the story, this project, the rehabilitation or restoration or landscape development of Block Island, Rhode Island, this project, I was in control of this, and I had architects even from MIT that came to work on this, and it made me, finally, I got the confidence. I knew that what I don't know, I have to get the architects, the engineers, I have to get the consultants, get the best people, make a team, collaboration. This is a lesson that I learned, and then I was ready. I was ready. Well, as I left Harvard, though, and said goodbye and thanked them for supporting my crazy ideas on Block Island and that, which I could go into. It was a very socialist project designed for the United United Garment Workers, and for free vacations for them out on Block Island, Rhode Island, you know. Had to do with carrying capacity and all those good things. Anyhow, the chairman said, hey, pick up here's a farm for Japan, Fulbright. Japan's just opened up as Fulbright. I took the farms. I went home. I did some projects on my own for the United Mine Workers in the mountains, and it was a disaster, a complete disaster, my work there. So I thought I better go to, I filled out the forms, and I was chosen to go to Japan. So the Fulbright and this scholarship, those were great turning points and great lessons. In Japan particularly, if I hadn't gone to Japan, I would be a completely different person. It changed my entire attitude toward life, toward economics, toward social customs. I played around with Zen some. Zen is a lot more than just controlled breathing exercises, but that was the best thing I got out of Zen, was learning how to breathe. No, seriously, you know, I had serious asthma, and the doctors here, they don't tell you anything about, hey, you can learn to breathe differently. And no, they just fill you with dope and medicines, you know. So, but Zen is not fulfilling to me either, because it's a philosophy. It's not a religion or anything, but to me, it's a little self-indulgent and too introspective and withdrawn. But anyhow, the thing is the design in Japan. Now, if you're going to build projects, be a landscape architect, that I learned so much there about how to put wood together and stone and plants and water and the inter-reciprocal relationship between these basic elements of landscape architecture. It's kind of a minimalist approach maybe, but it changed me. And this was totally unexpected to find this master landscape, the rice paddy fields, and the architecture, and farmhouse architecture, more so than the temples, just the things that are built of minimal materials on site, the beauty of the economy of putting things together without nails and so on. You know, it's so sophisticated, their architecture. And I had the crazy idea that I could come, finally I thought time is passing me by, and I'd go back to the States and I would use this approach of working with your materials at hand. So it goes much beyond materials. It's a spatial connection. The study of spatial relationships and the ability to throw all the walls away in a building and really be in the out of doors and have the out of doors come to you and all. Well, you have to live through a winter in Japan to appreciate those things. So I came back, and there was no work in Seattle, and so I I went back to California, where I had old friends, and worked for Larry Halpern. Oh, I forgot to mention, when I was at Harvard, I worked for Dan Kiley 2 summers. So that's a whole other thing. I was able, just imagine, in those days, there were so few landscape architects, you could almost pick the person you wanted to work for. You could certainly pick the area that you wanted to work, the region and so on. So these couple of early projects I did after about 14 months in Larry's office. And I learned a lot there. I learned a lot about detailing, and of course I had all the Japanese knowledge of wood construction. And anyhow, these are a couple of small gardens. I did 40 gardens in 2 years. So these poor clients were my guinea pigs. I was trying out all my ideas. And this kind of represents that period of man and nature, you know, architecture and free living spirit, you know, just bringing those two things together in a very tight fusion. And I had some clients that actually wanted tea houses and that, and so now that happened. That's not good. Thank you. John, you're a sweetheart. He's on the ball. So I did this was a case study house. There was a famous publisher, wealthy man, who used to do Arts and Architecture magazine. And every month, an architect would present a dream house that they would design. So this was a Don Knorr house, very Miesian, and I did the landscape, and you see the hedges and the spaces, interior gardens, and see that dumbbell kind of shape of mounds. That kind of reoccurs. It's an early introduction to that. And putting everything in a wall or a controlled space, but having the trees arch over and be the connector. There's a lot of Japanese lessons in there. And then this was a client who, a wealthy publisher, she actually wanted a tea house And I did this over a pond. Well, I got a call from Washington, University of Washington, College of Architecture and Urban Planning. They said they were interested in perhaps setting up a Department of Landscape Architecture, and was there enough interest, and would that be possible? So I assured them it would be under my control, and went up there and started. That was in autumn of '58, and then I taught there until '98. I never taught full-time because I had an unusual contract with the university. I insisted that I be able to have a practice, an office, as well as teach. So I was acting chairman. Anyhow, and I really learned so much from the students. At first I had, while I was joining the program and begging every department, civil engineering, forestry, botany, and so on, to set up some class there that I could send students to. That took a couple of years of negotiation, and then they gave me the go-ahead, and I started getting the students. But, the first 2 years, though, I taught architects. And, of course, I taught them in site planning and landscape, the importance of landscape and context. You know, before that, they never had a context for any of the buildings they designed. Oh, here's a quick story. When you go there, you have to write what they call it an esquisse. They give a program out on Wednesday morning, and the architecture students have to come back with a design at 10 that night. So I had to write their program one time. You know, the new faculty writes the program, and they would be things like, design a space station to be manned by a Zionist and a Women's Arab League, or just ridiculous things. And so I wrote 3 words on a blank sheet of paper and handed it out. Was design a tree. You can't design a tree. You can draw them. You can describe them. But a tree came through evolution. It's a living machine. And so they never asked me to write another program. And shortly afterwards, the whole program crashed, so that was good. But anyhow, I had these architecture students, so I have 50, 60 in three or four classes, so I found the ones that were too smart to be architects. So I got them into my new department, my new program, without any loss of credits. You know, we had to do a little interesting bookkeeping there and all, but and those people turned out to be great. You know, one of them was here, Laurie Olin, Grant and Ilsa Jones. That's Grant and Ilsa Jones there. Why can't we see Grant? Maybe the light's bad there. The light's bad. Anyhow, and Laurie Olin, Jones, Deedhelm, and these people, Hannah, they all became really famous landscape architects, and some of them started their own professions in that. So that's a nice legacy to have. But so I would get them, okay, look at sites around the world, and so here's some examples of different site planning on, in, over, and these are sketches by Laurie Olin. I remember that. And here we have Ilsa's father was an engineer, and he designed a space machine, and we'd design all these things, and we'd crank it up because we were interested in designing highways to be seen at 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, you know. And a course that was based on Stan White's course, which he called Heinz Pickles, which was 57 varieties, you know. Anyhow, with a title like that, it gives you the right to talk about any damn thing you want to. So I took that as a idea and developed my theory and perception of landscape architecture course. And one of my students did this poster as she tried to capture all of the gems, all of the expressions and sayings, and the magic measure, 300 feet, never build on the best part of the site, all of really good things. Ethnically correct group of students there, I think. They borrowed my camera to take that picture, and it shows up in, where did this come from? Yeah. Anyhow, the offices, I always had these small storefront offices, and I believe in that. I like to be down on the sidewalk where the people go by, and I always planted these katsura trees, which I grew. At this time, I started a nursery too in 1962. I was redoing the World's Fair. That was 63, 62, the Seattle World's Fair. Anyhow, I thought, my God, I can grow these trees here. You know, I don't have to go to Illinois and Ohio and pay $40 to have topsoil with a tree in it shipped out here. I can grow these things right here. So I bought 60 acres and started a nursery. And so those are my katsura trees. And this was taken maybe by the cars. You can figure out this was probably about 56 or so. And those trees now, you should see them. And they're growing away and pushing the building over, you know. Architects often ask us, they'll ask you, how close can you plant a tree to a building, or how close can you plant a building to a tree? Not very close do you plant buildings to trees, but trees to buildings, the tree will figure it out. Go ahead and plant it. See what happens. And here I was experimenting with all the kinds of poplars, the hybrids and the cottonwoods and the aspen. I have a wonderful form of aspen which grows as well in Seattle as aspen in Aspen, Colorado. Anyhow, this was a great experiment, except the beavers came up from the lake and cut them all off on me. A big break. Big break was Larry Halpern was landscape architect for Seattle Center, 74 acres, 1962, and he had a falling out with the prime architect, so they got me into the picture. So I did the master planning for the area in 63 and 64, and again in 78. So, and here I was roundly criticized. You see, it's kind of European plazas and squares and earthworks and trees in rows, and people would say, how come you didn't plant natives? I said, well, you give me 4 or 5 feet of forest duff, and I'll think about it. But I'll be damned if I'm planting natives in the Vashon glacial till. So we'll talk about that in the next class, I think, is about planting. I have some strong ideas about that. Okay. So there are the mounds. I took the foundations of the old buildings and crushed them up and covered them with soil and made these, they call them Indian shell mounds. But it kept the soil from being hauled and dumped into the lake, an act of immorality. And then now they built a building in there, but they kept most of the perimeter mounds. So then I mentioned I bought the 60 acres up on the Stillaguamish River in a floodplain. It's very inexpensive soil, and it floods up there every year, usually twice. And so a nursery is a perfect use for that area. And this is sandbar. Beyond this is quicksand. I used to throw a ball out there for the city kids that would visit with my kids. These are 4 of my kids. 5? 5. I forget. I think there were 7 all total. And these city kids would go out, and there's a bar of quicksand, you know, and they start disappearing. I advise it. I've never been able to do that in a park. I'm going to do that sometime. Anyhow, you can learn so much from the children. And this is the river there, the Stillaguamish River. And it's full of chum salmon right now. They're catching them there, summer and winter. And this is a way to learn about the native landscape and the slip and slack of the tides and the flooding. And I have every known landscape in 60 acres, you know, from gravel to aquifers to quicksand to boulders to forest, everything. Another advantage of teaching is one of my very first students, Dave Hodemacher, he became the lead architect on this project, and it's 20 acres, a think tank for Battelle, and we, through history, found that Lake Washington used to go up there before they lowered the lake when they built the locks, changed the whole ecology of Seattle. Why the lake used to go in there, so we reestablished the lake there and won a lot of awards. Interior courtyards. This was a terrible mistake. I had a crazy idea that we could design things like kebblises, these benches and things that would be knocked down and assembled, you know, and you buy them at Sears or today Costco or something. And that we could do these council rings, which I stole council rings from Jensen, thank you. And I use them all the time because it's a real primitive thing, getting together, teaching, talking, telling stories, building a fire, cooking, you know, it's in our genes, it's in our evolutionary past, the fire. And I had they were so expensive often they couldn't be afforded, so I had the idea I could do them, prefab the amount of units that could be assembled in that. So this was an attempt, and it's pretty awful and too tight. And that's the rest of that 20 acres is part of it is a nature preserve because of endangered species and so on. And that plant you see there is the Himalayan blackberry. And I think that is one hell of a beautiful landscape, better than anything I could do. And English ivy going up the trees. 2 of the most beautiful, exotic invasives you could imagine. And then primitive things always have interested me, and cairns. I do quite a few cairns, and I'm proposing them on some more projects today. Oh, hello, now I need help. Thank you. Very quick. 62, the competition for Franklin Delano Roosevelt Memorial Competition between the Potomac and the Tidal Basin, Washington, D.C. So I had this entry, and it was based on the idea of a teepee, and that all of these, each stave represented an original charter member of the United Nations, and there were 52 of them. And these were bronze, and they all fit together, and the idea is you can add to them, but you can't subtract because it weakens the structure. So that was a memorial, I thought, United Nations to Franklin Delano. And it was all to be on the black base, Norwegian granite, pearl granite. And thank goodness I didn't win, place, or show. I mean, that would be horrible You can imagine standing on this black granite, you know, maybe at midnight it'd be interesting to see the moon coming through or something. And then the idea was each new nation would have its own stave. Well, I think there's 152 now, so, you know, it's stupid. But on the strength of it, I found the 4 winners and called up Abe Geller in New York and said, I'm your man. You need a landscape architect. So he paid my way there. I'd have to pay my way back, but anyhow. So I worked with him and we did this, and it was based on the idea of 4 seasons. I think this thing doesn't work, so hello. Oh, it does. Hello. Excuse me. So the 4 seasons, that's a restaurant. The 4 freedoms, freedom of fear, freedom of want, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. So each one of those great cantilevered roofs would feature that. And it had a lower element which had a lot of Roosevelt memorabilia in it. And it just, the circulation didn't work, but we couldn't get him to give up on the lower chamber. But anyhow, the Roosevelt, I like the grading. The grading is, I love grading. The earth is so sensuous to give form to. Somehow I'm gift blessed. I can just feel it. I just know. Anyhow, the Roosevelt family rejected all of these. This came in second, and then about 30 or 40 years later, Larry Halpern was picked by the National Park Service to design the memorial that's built down there now, which is on a processional kind of thing. Sorry, too much. So then came a big phase of community colleges. The people coming back from the war and a big surge of educational institutions, facilities. On the right is a kind of all-purpose athletic thing for tennis backstop or handball or basketball. It serves in many different sports and all. And I think I'm going to put together an exhibit of just things that are sort of outside of landscape, but are more art objects or site-specific designs. The kind of thing the earth artists and that do. On the left, that project, that's a great plaza in a campus in eastern Washington, which probably has a climate similar to here. And it gets so hot there in the summer, so the irrigation goes on and the grass comes in really thick and cooling, and the brick set on sand evaporates. So it's a great idea of having both, you know, taking lots of traffic and yet being soft and green, and the paths change as the class scheduling and class loads change. So that project is, that's got me a lot of work, that one idea. And then travel. I can't emphasize enough for you young people before you get burdened with debt and wives and husbands and children and so on, to get out and move around. There's so much on this planet to see, the natural and the cultural. And I strongly advise you to take a year, 2 years, and move. And this is Versailles. I had some crazy ideas that this design was based on the rice paddies of Indochina. You know, that doesn't work out chronologically at all. And you have to have a few crazy ideas, because once in a while you strike gold, you know, but a lot of it's fool's gold. And then on the right is I think, the greatest single landscape by Western man, by Occidental man, and that's the, what is it, Strogarten, the crematory and cemetery outside of Stockholm, done by a famous architect and a landscape architect. But you'll see that influenced my work a lot. Maybe you'll see that. And also the movement, bicycles and so on in Copenhagen, and earthworks that were built there from to keep Nazi bombs from bomb blast. But go to Venice and look at the byways and the way to walk around Venice. Nobody, I think, I'm probably wrong, has studied pedestrian movement in Venice. Everybody thinks about the canals, of course. You know, it's like the time, side story. Harold Ross sent Robert Benchley to Venice, shanghaied him. He was a drunk. And so they said, well, let's get him out of here and put him on a boat, and he came to in Venice. And Bob Benchley wires back to Ross. These are New Yorker magazine people. Wires back, he says, "Streets filled with water, please advise." But anyhow, and things that happen, you see, we did 4 different designs for these plazas around the federal office building in Seattle, Washington. And we used a great plaza in front, a great plaza below, and parking underneath. We did all the conventional things. But I did this scheme we called it, the architect's Bassetti. He's very Italian, and and so Fred, and then finally there's this strange design we call this alternative, the Spanish stairs. That's the one. Words are so important, you'll find out in your career. The right word at the right time. The Spanish stairs. So he called up, we have an outpost in Rome, the University of Washington. He called up Zarina and he says, "Get me the ratio of the riser treads at Spanish stairs." And so she sent a student over, and his name was Stephen Hole. You've probably heard of him. And he measured the stairs. And of course, there are about 13 different ratios. You would expect that in Italy. My life is so wonderful. It's so full of, yeah. And then you have to fight every now and then. And this man, Victor Steinbrück, there with the Corbusier glasses and the stevedore hat, he was an architect friend of mine, and he led many civic protests in Seattle. And so I was his mentor. He was my mentor. I was his accolade, I guess you say. And so we fought to save the Pike Place Market. And we learned a lot. I learned a lot of guerrilla warfare tricks. In fact, I taught a course on guerrilla warfare, how to get your way around stubborn bureaucrats and politicians. And so we went to the people and used the idea of initiative and got it on the ballot, and the people voted. They had done 13 schemes for a World Trade Center there over the bones of the Pike Place Market. So we saved that. You come there today. But every 10 years, these things, you save them, and every 10 years another attack comes, another assault. In fact, a few years ago, I talking to Halperin, and Halperin said, get ready, you're going to have to spend a lot of time to save your early projects. And I thought he was kidding me, but he was absolutely right. And look at his projects that have been decimated or vandalized, totally vandalized. So anyhow, this was a happy ending, and we were even actually later rewarded by a commission to design a park on a parking garage just north of, it's downtown Seattle in the background, and a children's park is part of this. So this is a window for one of the few public windows. Now we have Olympic Sculpture Garden, 11 acres below this. This is 2 acres, 1 acre, 300 by 100, yeah. And now this park is under protest, as is Freeway Park and all, because of people are using the park. The very people that need the park the most, the people that do not have country clubs, do not have transportation, that live on the streets, they're the people that use these parks. I think I heard about problems like this in Salt Lake City. And there's a big movement. This guy, Fred Kent, stamp him out. He's terrible. He goes around to these communities and tells them how to put in a Starbucks and take out all the benches, because, my God, there are people sitting on your benches. Why, they're being sheltered by your shelters. Get them out of here. Move them out. Where are they going to go? So there's a huge conspiracy in this country to make parks pay for themselves. And parks are the hallmark of a democratic society. Free and open parks for all of the people. And now they're trying to put fences and charge admission. The federal government tried it with national parks. They found out it cost more to man the toll stations than they brought in, and attendance dropped off. So another rant. Excuse me. On the strength of those puny little mounds and gasworks, a contractor said, I gotta move all this soil. We're digging a yacht turning basin in the mud flats, and we have to haul all this soil and dump it in the tidal flats. So can't you come and do something? So in 3 days' time, we designed this park. And please notice the date is 1970. I think concurrently, Smith's and Spira Jenny was being built. So this is an early earthwork, and we really didn't know, we didn't have time to test that this tidal muck could be stacked and held into position, 1-to-1 slopes, but we took a chance and we did this. And these are other views of, and then the Navy tried to come and build fuel tanks here. So we got the park named after a famous judge who used to do pro bono work for the city, and got him to named after him. That's another trick. Get a grove named as a memorial to somebody. Oh, I got to move faster. People are tiring. I can travel again. Olympic playgrounds, adventure playgrounds, Zurich, Switzerland. Tried for years and years to do this in Seattle without success. I almost got one by default one time, but we used to design these custom playgrounds like that, and now that thing is completely vandalized by the park department, because that erratic boulder and that sculpture and that climbing, they're not done by some nationally recognized playground equipment manufacturer. So they tear these things down. I think we should have a conspiracy against these vandals, official vandals, our park departments. Competitions, I'd advise you to do this. We try to do a competition a year, try to be selective, and that's Boston, Copley Square on the right, and we came in second, and I re-entered it when they redesigned the park. And this one, nothing ever happened here with this one. We never heard, probably weren't in the running at all. Sorry. Pay attention, Haag. Pay attention. Another competition, Columbus, Ohio, and this we won the Garden of Maze, the Garden of Maze Garden, and the world's greatest Rose Garden. But President Bush decided to send the money to Kuwait. So this is part of the nursery. And these are my trees. These are all Katsuras, Magnificum, Cercidophyllum magnificum. And I grow a lot of them with multiple stems. I do not grow lollipop trees like the architects always want, you know, and have a great ball. This is my religion is out there every weekend working in the trees. Thank you. So here's an early grove of Katsura trees. And by having a nursery, you learn, you really know plants if you grow them from seed or cuttings, and you really know their habits, and then when you plant them out, you get all kinds of combinations that you would have never thought of, you see, because you're growing 100 of these and 50 of those, and so it's a very challenging and learning situation. And using these mature trees, and now everyone laughed at me, and now I have these billionaire clients, and they're not going to wait. So we moved 10, 15, 20-inch caliper trees to their estates and plant them. And a lot of them are on the lakefront, so we move them by barge and cranes. And but this is what you can do with just street tree planting. And those are on the left are aspen trees. There were 2 trees there that were cut down by the city because they were interfering with wiring. So I replanted 14 aspen, and we undergrounded the wire. And that's people drive out of their way to see this streetscape. Those are Katsuras. Anyhow, my wife is leading a big movement in Seattle to protect all of the mature trees, especially on public property and now private property. And another lucky break, the embassy and consulate in Lisbon. Looking through old documents, I found there had been that road that spirals on up the grade there to the entrance. There had been an old trade route through there. And we dug down in 4 feet deep through the pine needles net. We found this old road there. So history, it's important to know your history. Competition, small park, earth mounding, you see, is a big thing in my vocabulary, and trees, and there's some symmetricality there. And anyhow, we won, wasn't built. They don't know, they give, competitions in this country are not run very well. European competitions, they're after ideas and big concepts. And here they demand so much work that the small firm is really disadvantaged because they want practically working drawings, you know. They could really build some of these things from the entry. This is another huge failure of mine. This is 100 acres of landfill right out in the University of Washington. No, that isn't the Campanile. But that street that goes right up, well, I have it scratched in up there. That's the campus at Berkeley. And I used to haul my garbage there when I was there. Landfill, 100 acres. So got hired, won a competition, got hired, took my team of my good old Gasworks Park team of consultants, and we came up with a scheme for mining the garbage. And we could spend a lot of time maybe later. But anyhow, we found out that the methane was not a problem, that there are bacteria that digest methane. And the worst thing you can do is cap it. Cap it. If you do cap it, you should use it as a resource. The methane gas is a low grade of gas that can be used as fuel. And they should oxygenate the garbage. Our government policy is 180 degrees wrong. They dig up 40-year-old, 50-year, 60-year-old garbage, and they say, my God, here's a newspaper from the Second World War. You can still read it. Stupid. And then the other big thing was subsidence. Well, there was enough aluminum cans in this garbage to pay for mining it and turning it into fertilizer and excavating. And anyhow, we got everybody's approval, but the powers that be, the city attorney in Berkeley, wouldn't take it to the state environmental agencies to let us do a pilot program there, just to try our ideas. And the second hugest failure was this one in Berkeley. I've had nothing but failures in California. I'm staying out of there. I just did the federal office building there, and it's a disaster.